I do have a question about your midwives. I know you can't disclose too much, but what level of midwifery was there in the room with you? What were they?
I live in New York State, so like anybody who has a state license to practice midwifery is a CNM or a CM, which means that they are master's degree holding. The owner, Mora, and then the one of the midwives who was with me, not throughout the main parts of my labor, but the earlier part, they were all CNM. So they had gone to nursing school, then nurse practitioner school, and their focus on midwifery. And they got licensed through the state through that. And then the other midwife, she had her under her undergrad and her master's in something. Her undergrad was in something public health related. I don't remember exactly what it was. I remember knowing that she was not a CNM. I was interested, what was your undergrad? Because I don't want to do like a history major who became a nurse or who became a midwife. So I remember it being something health field related. So it was like, okay, at least I know you, like, you understand how to do like statistical analysis, and you know risk prevention, and you know like virology and stuff. So I felt comfortable with whatever her undergrad was, and then she went for her master's degree in nurse or in midwifery. Not lay people, all licensed by the state, all have degrees higher than my degree level.
So, Mora, did she contact you after?
No, no. Um, she, some people from Fika tried contacting me, but I didn't want to talk to anybody. And it was only for the first like 2 weeks, and then they stopped trying to contact me. They did keep sending me a bill for $10. Um, and it wasn't until October of 2020 I kept getting the bill every month in my email. And it actually increased from $10 to $30. And I finally like went on Facebook, and she like had posted something, and I was like, "You're such an a-hole. You're nickel and diming people after you kill their babies. And I keep getting a bill for $10 from you, you scumbag." And I never got the bill again. So
Well, that worked.
it did. No regrets.
After John James passed, when was the next loss that you learned of?
So there haven't been any losses since John James died.
Really?
Yeah, shock. Well, that I know of that,
Okay.
but there's been a lot of like dumping people on death's door at the hospital. I mean, that very night they had to have a transfer for hemorrhage. It really just it was nonstop. Like the just because nobody died doesn't mean catastrophe isn't still striking. And I know that when I was lawyer searching, all the lawyers' offices that I had communicated with were very eager to speak with me because I was not the first person with a claim against them that had come across their desk, but that there had been so many where the hospitals just did the right thing so perfectly that it's like, oh, well, we had a baby who had 42 hours on cooling and a 2-month NICU stay, but miraculously they seem to be okay. And these things have like a statute of limitations. So in New York State, you only have 2.5 years to file for this. So it's like if your baby doesn't die, but almost dies, gets out of the NICU, you only have 2.5 years from their birth to file a lawsuit against any potential malpractice. And at that point, you're just thankful your baby survived. You're not in the school age where you're learning like all of the different things that like the human brain is developing until you're 24 years old. That brain damage, theoretically, I don't know how rapidly, but there's a lot of like schizophrenia tends to make its appearance in the early to mid 20s. So it's like just because you survived doesn't mean that you're not going to be like hugely and massively impacted by the trauma that you endured.
If Maura hadn't been playing games, how fast would the lawsuit have been settled, do you think?
It wouldn't have been filed. Like, you have to, in order to file a lawsuit, you have to make their attorneys aware that you're planning to file a lawsuit, and they have the option to come to settlement before filing ever even happens. And I didn't speak with any of them. I have no idea how any of it actually went with like the legal teams communicating with one another. But I know that when all was said and done this past April, so April 2024, on the phone with my lawyer when she presents the idea, drop more from the lawsuit, we can move to mediation and we can get this settled. She told me that like paperwork doesn't lie and lawyers know that, and they have no case. They've wanted this to be done for years. Nobody wants this to keep going except for Mora. Um, so I think this would have been said and done 3-4 years ago.
If Maura had wanted to settle, what would you have asked from her?
That's such a like abstract question, because it's like it's really asking me like, what would you take on a deserted island? Because it's like I could come up with all these philosophical answers and why things would be important to me, but the honest truth is that like if I was on a deserted island, I'd just surrender and die. Um, and I just like there is no version of reality where fight this knockdown tooth and nail fight it, that I've never even like been able to process the concept of a world where she didn't fight against this. There's no version, there is no alternate reality where Maura Winkler exists to take personal responsibility for the things that she's done. She's totally fine taking responsibility for like positive things that happen, but she does not take responsibility for the bad things that happen at all. From the minute it happened, I was like, I'm in for a fight.
So at no point, if you offered her, hey, I want a public apology and I want you to do X, Y,
Oh
and Z in your
no.
practice. Nope, she would have never.
If I had want you to write me a check for $2.5 million and I'll disappear quietly, she would have probably taken that. Um, if I had said, I want a public apology and I'll write you a check for $100, that never would have happened. Like her publicly, like that's not even, there's no reality. There's no, in every version of time and space, she is
The victim.
a villain with a
Well,
victim
true.
complex. And I have like a bizarre brain and I can like conjure up a lot of like realities in my head. Like I can so many different things if I want to. And there's there's never been a story, not even like people touting her for being amazing. There's never been a story or anything that I've ever heard or witnessed or read from anyone who's interacted with her where I'm like, you know what, she really is the hero of that story. She's the good person of that story. It's always like either the mothers, the parents who are giving birth are the heroes of the story, or she's the hero of the story. But when you read between the lines, she created all the situations that then needed somebody to save them. So I don't equate Mora with human emotion, to be completely honest. And I'm not the only person who feels that way about her.
Just asking the question is impossible.
Yeah, like
She just couldn't conceive that this would be something that she could do, let alone it would be advisable for her to do.
yeah, no, I don't. I
Did you actually have any idea she was like that before all of this happened?
I'm gonna be completely honest. I had a weird feeling about her before all of this happened. When I went to my first appointment where we did the patient intake and she gave me the tour of the building, if she hadn't said, I'll be on maternity leave when you're due, so I won't be doing your care, I don't think I would have chosen to deliver there. But it wasn't like, it didn't feel sinister. It was more like I could kind of tell our personalities didn't mesh well. And I remember being like, oh, well, if you're going to have a natural birth, it's all about who you choose to be with. And like, she and I don't vibe with each other very well. Like, I kind of feel, I kind of feel like she's arrogant. She feels like, and some people like that in a medical provider. Like, some people like that person who walks into the room and is like, okay, this is my room. I know what I'm doing. And that's not what I was looking for. If I wanted that, I was going to go to the hospital. But I had met one of the other midwives while I was in the waiting room waiting to meet Maura. And that was one of the midwives I was going to be with throughout my pregnancy. And that one, when she walked into the room, just like made me feel like I was filled with cream pastries and jellies and chocolates. And I was just like, you're amazing. And I want you to help me deliver my baby. So, like, Maura felt very odd for me to be around, but she's very smart. Like, it's incredibly difficult to be around her without acknowledging like there's a sheer brilliance to her. So it was one of those things where it's like sometimes people who are really smart just aren't good at people. And she'll admit she's like antisocial and stuff. So I was like, okay, we just don't vibe. Not she's evil and doesn't care about that, but
Were you the one who told me that she was giving a tour of White House and all she was as a potential client, and all she kept on doing was talking about the building and the architecture and everything she did? Or was that someone else?
that may have been somebody else because when I first went there, she hadn't done a ton of work to it besides like painting. She recently put, I don't even know what the number would have been, but she had to have put hundreds of thousands of dollars of renovations into the Coit House, which is something I had to really like learn to settle with her, is that she's got that kind of brilliance where she steps over the next right thing to do the next grand gesture. Um, so like she put so much money into the building. And then after she's done with renovations is when she tries to get the building licensed as like an actual licensed birth center in the state of New York. And she essentially on the panel, and and this is how like weird and psychologically manipulative she can be. She got ripped apart on the panel when the New York State Department of Health was talking, like going over her application for a license for the birth center. Cause they're like, you're the head medical provider of this facility and you have multiple investigations against your license from the State Department of Education. But here nor there, even outside of that, because that's not really our jurisdiction, your entire building is not ADA compliant. Like you can't even get a wheelchair into the building.
Really?
So why are you, oh yeah, no, the building was built in like 1812 and sometime in the mid 1800s, it got moved like plank by plank to a new spot. And there's a brick walkway with a wrought iron gate in front of it. And you have to step up a brick step, open the wrought iron gate, go down the wobbly brick sidewalk, and then there's like a brick semicircle 2-step entryway before another step into the building. And all of the birth rooms are upstairs. Health was like, and you just put how much money into this place? It's all over your social media. Why didn't you make it ADA compliant?
Or at least the first floor.
Yeah.
And put one birthing room down there. It
yeah.
would have.
And so she just like, she can't see the forest through the trees sometimes. And so that's why I'm like, I don't even think she takes the business of business seriously, but she doesn't take like the business that she's currently committed to very seriously. It's all about like the big grand gestures. And she posted, like, I know about that hearing being available on the internet because she posted it to her social media afterwards. And I'm like, they make you look like you're kind of arrogant and like you get a little ripped apart for like personal choices that you make about your business. And she posted it to her social media about look at the way that the state of New York tears midwives apart. And everybody was just like, victim, victim. How could they say these things about you? You're so wonderful.
Oh, that's what she wanted.
Well, there's a line somebody said in that VBAC group that we are part of, and we're not allowed to talk about names outside of the group, but it is a line that I have said. I've held on to it for years. Midwifery is perfect profession for a sociopath to hide in. All of the things that people say about OBGYNs too, like there's really something to be said when you are the guide to get life here safely. But OBGYNs choose to do it in a place where there's like so many options for backup and support that when it starts going haywire, they don't have to be God.
Right.
And midwives like that. I need to save this baby who wouldn't even be in danger if I didn't get my hands on him in the first place.
They like to control the narrative, and it's really hard to do that in a hospital because the hospital is controlling a lot of things. One of the things that has struck me about the doctors who ended up losing their licenses is the fact that by the time they lost their license, they had lost privileges in hospital after hospital because they could not simply follow any rules.
Compare it to like public school versus private school, where it's like, I really hope your private school is outperforming the public school, because like public schools, like every child has a right to an education in this country, and you private school people get to select who gets to stay there, and you should only be selecting the cream of the crop, because if you don't have the resources to support the special ed students, and if you don't have the resources, and that's like what midwives are. And I always say, like, when people compare midwives, I've said this so many times to people, we're a football town, Buffalo. I've said to people so many times when they start quoting like Coit House's birth statistics last year, and is there any hospital around here that can even compare to this? And I'm like, well, yeah, you're comparing like if the Super Bowl winning team had a scrimmage against our local high school. I would hope that the midwives statistics are absolutely perfect, because she should only be taking the perfect candidate for the environment that she's working in. And she should be being exceedingly cautious so that the extreme emergencies are vetted out well before catastrophe strikes.
I mean, they should be transferring on concerning, not catastrophe.
To save their reputation, to have that high bar, and to keep the whole like, look, we only take low risk. Look, we are caring and protecting of you. Instead of just taking whatever and then just letting it ride and seeing what happens, it's like it's not how things work out, because it goes really bad, you know?
That story of, oh yeah, this happened to another woman and then she just like whooped their baby out. It's like, what do I say? What do we say in the VBAC group about anecdotes? You're telling me a story about somebody else's birth. This has no relevance to me. That happened to an entirely different person.
Do they become accredited birth center?
Good question.
Through the CABC, the Center for Accrediting Birth Centers or whatever, which that was one of the other things, is that so Mora got actually, New York State used to not accept third-party accreditation. If you wanted to be accredited as a birth center, you had to be accredited through the New York State Department of Health. And Mora like petitioned and got that law changed so that you could have third-party accreditation. So then she immediately goes to the CABC to get accreditation through the CABC, and they give it to her. And that was one of the things that she cited in like the Department of Health license meeting for the birth center was she was like, well, I'm accredited as a birth center through the CABC. And somebody was like, yeah. And actually, ironically, we went to the CABC's website to look at what their credentials for accreditation of a birth center are. And according to their own credentials, they won't accredit a birth center that the main provider is under investigation or that the facility doesn't comply with ADA. So we're interested how you got that accreditation too. Is what did you do to get that accreditation, or should we just assume all of their accreditations are
Lies.
against their own rules and regulations?
Yeah. And see, and I asked for a reason because of Nevada has like none of them were accredited, right? They've had a bunch of people trying to put these birth centers in, trying to be accredited. I mean, you're talking like the heads of the state midwives that are like trying to get these places like up north, down south. Everybody's been whatever, and the state just keeps denying. They just keep getting rejected for silly reasons. Like it's just like you're saying, like you don't have a ramp for a wheelchair, like you don't have a proper working bathroom, like literally silly reasons, or like you have to pay the fines, you have to pay the permitting, you have to pay stuff. And they were just like not doing any of that. But since I've left Nevada, these same places that have like super baby killers running their joints, they are accredited through the same place. And I'm like, that's weird because the state won't accredit them. The state doesn't recognize them even as a facility. They don't even recognize them as like a really like a medical building or any type of business. They're kind of like, and I don't even know if they file taxes. I don't know. But it's weird because now they're on the accreditation list. And I don't know if anybody kind of paid attention, but over, the past 10 years, it's been all these years with Gavin, kind of watching that because before we always kind of assumed if you were accredited, they had to go through some type of review process. They had to go through all these things. So we were telling people before, only go to accredited birth centers. Don't just go to any birth center, go to an accredited. And as it turns out, the places down in Florida that, they have all the stuff and they're getting like, shut down of the state shutting them down, or Texas, or even in New York, all these places are only accredited from this place, but they're not accredited through the state. The states aren't accrediting you, but we don't know that because then you're hearing people like, a customer comes up and they're like, we're accredited, but they don't know that they're not accredited through the state. They're just accredited by the state. So basically we have another NARM on our hands, but it's a different situation because now we have NARM that's like, here, everybody's a CPM because they gave me money for it, and we don't take it away. Now they're like, everybody's accredited. And it's like, so now when you look at birth centers and people be talking about birth centers, I'm like, are they connected in the hospital? And they're like, what? I'm like, if you're not on a hospital wing or like in the parking lot of the hospital, that is not accredited. I'm going to tell you right now, it's not medical. We have to get kind of like more detailed about it because now that I'm hearing, like, you look at the list was like not very long. Like like 10 years ago, if you looked at the accreditation list, there was like a few, like you had certain states that obviously like California, like obviously they have a ton of them. They're like almost every corner, like a McDonald's is a freaking birth center down in certain areas. Like that's real in certain parts of the country, like Washington or something. They just got them all over the place. But then it's like certain states, there was none. Like there was a bunch of states that would say like Nevada, no, like we don't have anything there. And a bunch of states like in the middle or whatever was like zero. Now suddenly you look on there, the list is like more than tripled. Like it's insane.
Wow.
And I'm like, I don't know if somehow somebody figured out, just like you're saying,
yeah, they probably figured out and promoted
they found out the loopholes. So interestingly enough, one of the things that they asked Maura in the Department of Health meeting was about like, how did the accreditation people, what sort of investigation did they do into the cause of the deaths of these babies? And she was like, they investigated it. They did whatever internal investigation they do for themselves, whatever. Which was interesting to me because I never like signed a HIPAA release or anything for them. So it's like, what records are they going through with this, how were they able, because like that means they wouldn't have been able to see his autopsy, which his autopsy is what talks about like the meninges of his brain and the condition of them and the layers of his umbilical cord. Like, how are you accrediting facilities that have open and active investigations against the licenses of people and not doing a deeper dive into like the medical care that they provided that caused those investigations? So it's all like, it's just something I'm learning. It's just like so shabby. It's all just like thrown together haphazardly with this like, they feign this sense of urgency, especially with COVID, where it's like ever since COVID, they've been like, you don't want to deliver in the hospital. And now there's like so much anti-vaccine rhetoric, and there's so many things that it's like you're going to get CPS calls on you if you deliver in the hospital, that it's like, it's all just so inescapable.
It is, and annoying.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mhm.
especially the CPS calls, because having worked in a pediatric hospital, I know it's not even a CPS call. It's where they transfer custody. If the family refuses needed medical care for an infant, the hospital will go through the legal process to get temporary medical custody just to make medical care decisions for the baby. And once the baby no longer needs that, and they just like to snap it back here, your family can have the child again. We're done. Send the baby outside of the. I mean, it is not. Nobody's. I don't even know if there's an actual investigation open for it. They're just like, okay, here we go. Let's do this thing. We're done doing this thing. The end. But it is kind of, I think, a shock to people who think that they can call the shots for a baby. And it's like, no, if your baby's that sick, no, you can't call the shots. Your baby needs care. And the hospital is not going to let a baby die while it's in their custody. It's like, that would be stupid, and get them in all kinds of hot water. I do want to say something for the accreditation, though. It's rather interesting. I was actually, they were trying to get a birth center in my city, even was trying to get accreditation through the state, and they failed. And one of the reasons they failed is because they could not get a care transfer protocol, basically.
Mhm.
They needed a transfer protocol with a local hospital. And this shouldn't be a problem if you are, of course, delivering care properly. They couldn't get it. And the thing
Yeah.
is, abortion clinics have to have that agreement as well. And we have abortion clinics. So clearly, people
It's not
can
impossible.
it's not impossible. I don't know if the state will recognize a CABC accreditation, but the reason they wanted it wasn't necessarily because they wanted a stamp of approval from the state. They wanted it because they could not bill certain health insurance policies for their care. They wanted it for the bucks. That's the only real reason they wanted it. Which I'm not going to say is not a proper incentive. Money does talk, but they refuse to jump through the hoops.